Hello and a very good morning. You're watching the Breakfast News on Rajya Sabha television with me, Frank Pereira. Here are the headlines. Voting to be held amidst tight security in 56 seats in West Bengal in phase 2 of the elections on Sunday. Fates of 383 candidates to be decided. EC issues instructions to keep controversial TMC leader Anubrata Mondal under Central Police Force surveillance. Tension continues in Kashmir as another youth dies in firing by security forces in Kupwara. Clashes after protests to mark fourth day of death of 3 people in army firing in Handwara. G20 nations seek crackdown on tax havens and shell companies during meeting in Washington. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley calls for more coordinated efforts to boost global growth. Another strong quake jolts Japan, 19 killed and hundreds injured as 7.3 magnitude quake jolts southern part of the nation. And India to take on Australia in the finals of the Sultan Azlan Shah Cup in Malaysia. India beat the hosts 6-1 to enter the finals for the 7th time. Well, let's begin the bulletin with some election news in our segment Verdict. Well, campaigning for the second phase of assembly polls in West Bengal came to an end at 5 p.m. on Friday. Voting will be held in 6 North Bengal districts, including Jalpaiguri, Darjeeling and Malda in this phase. The second phase of the polling for 56 assembly constituencies will take place on the 17th of April, which is tomorrow. The first phase of the 6-phase elections in the state was held in 2 parts on April 4th and April 11th. Meanwhile, elaborate security arrangements were made for the second phase of assembly elections in West Bengal. The Central Armed Police Forces will handle the situation inside the booths, while the state police forces are involved in other jobs like managing queues and crowds. In all, 83 companies of the Central Security Forces and 2,800 state police have been put in place to ensure peaceful polling. In all, 383 candidates are fighting for 56 constituencies going to polls in the second phase of West Bengal Assembly elections on April 17th.
एरिया डोमिनेशन कर रहे हैं, जो रूट चार्ट है उसके हिसाब से पूरे इलाके में जो फोर्सेस हैं वो विजिट कर रही हैं, पोलिंग बूथ्स और उसके सराउंडिंग विलेजेस में लोगों में कॉन्फिडेंस पैदा कर रहे हैं कि हम हैं और हम इंश्योर करेंगे फ्री और फेयर एंड पीसफुल पोलिंग.
ऑल बूथ्स सिंगल डबल ट्रिपल क्वाड्रुपल সবাই বুথের মধ্যে সিএপিএফ রয়েছে.
Well, let's now get your roundup of the other election related news in Polpuri. The Election Commission has barred political parties and candidates in West Bengal from giving any print media advertisement for the second phase of the assembly polls without pre-certification. It said such ads in the last stage of elections vitiate the election, and the affected candidates and parties will not have an opportunity for providing clarification and rebuttal in such cases. The polling for the second phase of the assembly elections in the state will be held on the 17th of April. The BJP has decided to go it alone in the Puducherry assembly polls. The decision comes after the ruling AINRC, which had fought the Lok Sabha polls in 2014 in alliance with the BJP, continues to maintain silence on its poll strategy. The BJP on Friday released its first list of names of candidates for 16 out of the 30 constituencies. Despite sweltering heat conditions and a lull in campaigning against the backdrop of the Kollam temple tragedy, canvassing for the May 16th assembly polls in Kerala is slowly picking up momentum. Leaders of political parties have been crisscrossing the state seeking votes. Chief Minister Roman Chandi has scheduled campaign programs which includes addressing poll meetings in Ernakulam and Palakkad today. He will be campaigning in his home constituency of Puttupalli in Alapura on Sunday. Meanwhile, 93-year-old CPM veteran and star campaigner for party-headed LDF V.S. Achyutanandan will tour the northern districts till the end of this month. Let's move on to other news now. Rajya Sabha Chairman Hamid Ansari gave his approval to the CBI to prosecute JDU MP Anil Sahani. The MP is facing charges of cheating and corruption in the LTC scam, but has so far denied all charges and refused to resign. Here's a report.
Rajya Sabha Chairman Mohammad Hamid Ansari gave his approval to the CBI to prosecute JDU MP Anil Sahani. The Rajya Sabha MP faces charges of cheating and corruption in what is being called the LTC scam. The Bihar MP will be the first from the upper house to be prosecuted by CBI.
ये खबर हमारे संज्ञान में है। पार्टी के राष्ट्रीय अध्यक्ष श्री नीतीश कुमार जी एवं वरिष्ठ नेता श्री शरद यादव जी को मैंने सभी तथ्यों से अवगत कराया है और हम श्री साहनी जी के भी संपर्क में हैं। उचित समय पर आपको सही सूचनाओं से अवगत कराएंगे।
The CBI has charged that Sahani conspired with other persons to use forged e-tickets and fake boarding passes without performing the actual journey. His actions allegedly defrauded Rajya Sabha to the tune of 23.71 lakh rupee.
This case was surfaced in 2013, and at that point of time our party stand was very clear that if there is something evidence, the case should be filed and the trial should take place, and anybody guilty should not be spared.
CBI filed a case on 31st of October 2013 against Sahani and others after the Central Vigilance Commission reported the case. Sahani, however, has denied the charges and refused to resign the membership of the House.
ये सब राजनीति से प्रेरित है। जो राजनीति से द्वेष रखने वाले लोग हैं, उसको सबके सामने सीबीआई को उसका जांच करना चाहिए। या आखिर किस कारण से इनके खाता में एक पैसा भी नहीं गया है और किस कारण से मेरे पास में भेजा गया। तो कहीं न कहीं सीबीआई को भी दिग्भ्रमित करने का काम किया गया है।
कानून अपना काम करेगा और लेकिन इससे निश्चित रूप से कि जेडीयू जैसे जो दल है, हालांकि नीतीश कुमार जी से कोई आप नैतिकता की अपेक्षा कर नहीं सकते क्योंकि वो स्वयं एक चारा घोटाले के जो आरोपी हैं उनके साथ गठबंधन बनाकर साबुद्दीन जैसे अपराधियों के साथ मिलकर आज वो बिहार के सत्ता में हैं।
Sahani claimed that twice he drew attention of the authorities in 2013 about false bills submitted in his name by racketeers against LTC. The second-term Rajya Sabha member called it a conspiracy against him, claiming that he was a whistleblower and was unfairly targeted. All MPs get 34 air tickets in a year for themselves, their family members and associates for domestic travel to their constituencies. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Meanwhile, Kashmir continued to be on the boil after one more youth was killed in firing by security forces in Kupwara district to disperse the stone-pelting mob. Police said that 4 persons were also injured in the firing, which started after a mob started pelting stones on an army camp. Protests rocked many places in Kupwara and its adjoining areas on Friday to mark the 4th day of death of 3 persons who were killed in the firing by security forces in Handwara on Tuesday. The death toll has now risen to 5 in the unrest that began following allegations of molestation of a girl in Handwara. The situation in the North Kashmir district has worsened following a fresh casualty. Separatist groups including Hardline Hurriyat Conference have called for a shutdown in the valley today.
Violent protests in many places in Kupwara and Handwara today, where the mobs attacked the security force establishment and the police deployed on the ground. A large number of policemen have got injured in the various incidents. Despite severe provocation, the forces deployed on the ground exercised maximum restraint. However, in one incident in Natnusa, where the mob tried to enter an army location, the forces had to resort to firing, in which one person has lost his life.
Meanwhile, in an apparent U-turn, Pakistan is now expressing willingness to resume talks with India, but the central government has indicated that dialogue will resume only after Pakistan takes concrete action on those behind the Pathankot airbase attacks. Meanwhile, India has also objected to the use of a secret veto to protect terrorists from UN sanctions, an action that China has repeatedly taken, most recently to shield the Pathankot attackers.
More flip-flops from Pakistan over the dialogue process with India. Pakistan's Foreign Office now says the door for talks still is open. The comments come a week after Pakistan High Commissioner Abdul Basit said the comprehensive bilateral dialogue process was suspended. Pakistani Foreign Office spokesperson Nafees Zakaria said, and I quote him, "We need to look ahead and not think in terms of foreclosing any options. Both sides are in contact with each other. Once the modalities are worked out, secretary-level talks would take place."
It is Pakistan which has created confusion. The Pakistan ambassador in India making such a statement a few days back created confusion. Actually, India and Pakistan should engage themselves in a meaningful dialogue and try to sort out all the problems bilaterally.
पाकिस्तान अब भरोसे लायक नहीं रहा। जिस तरह से पठानकोट की जांच के बाद उसने पलटी मारी, वो अविश्वसनीय साथी।
Last December, the two nations agreed to restart the peace dialogue, calling it the Comprehensive Bilateral Dialogue. However, Foreign Secretary-level talks between the two countries were derailed after the terror attack on the Pathankot Air Force Base, in which 7 security personnel were killed. Pakistan-based Jaish-e-Mohammed claimed responsibility for the attack, in which 6 attackers were also killed. India sent evidence to Pakistan and also hosted its joint investigation team in Pathankot.
The joint investigation team loud and clear while in India makes a statement that there's clinching evidence being provided by India which convinces them beyond an out of doubt of the involvement of Pakistan. The Pakistan media said that there's been no cooperation and the entire thing was stage managed, etc., based on which the Pakistan High Commissioner India Waseet, on his own volition, without perhaps the clearance from the establishment of Pakistan, but maybe on the direction of the Pakistan Army, stated that talks have been suspended. Made him look ridiculous and foolish.
Meanwhile, India slammed the use of hidden veto that allowed China to block its bid at the United Nations to ban Pathankot mastermind JEM chief Masood Azhar. Demanding accountability, India said the world body's general members were never informed the reason for not acceding to requests for sanctioning terrorists. During a debate at the UNSC on Thursday, India's permanent representative to the UN ambassador Syed Akbaruddin said, and I quote him, "The procedure of unanimity and anonymity of the Al-Qaeda, Taliban and ISIS sanctions committees need to be revisited. The procedures of unanimity and anonymity lack in a result of accountability," quote unquote. After the Pathankot attack, India wrote to the United Nations to list JEM chief under the UN Sanctions Committee. China used its veto to request the UN committee to keep it on hold. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
It's time for a short break now, but news and updates will continue on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
मेरे साथ देखिए तमिलनाडु का हाल। चलेगा जयललिता का जादू या करुणानिधि करेंगे कमाल?
केरल की बात मेरे साथ। किस गठबंधन का होगा क्या अंजाम? देखिए पूर्ण चुनाव अभियान।
क्या है बंगाल की तस्वीर? तृणमूल कांग्रेस का असर या फिर सीपीएम होगी मजबूत? मतदाता थामेगा कांग्रेस का हाथ या बीजेपी को मिलेगा वोटर का साथ? असम के लोगों का किसको मिलेगा साथ? खिलेगा कमल या फिर कांग्रेस का हाथ?
पुडुचेरी का मैदान, कांग्रेस मारेगी बाजी या एनआर कांग्रेस का रहेगा राज? और क्या बीजेपी कर पाएगी शुरुआत?
देखिए हमारे साथ पश्चिम बंगाल से,
केरल से,
पुडुचेरी से,
असम से
पल पल की खबर।
देखिए लोकतंत्र 2016 सिर्फ राज्यसभा टीवी पर।
Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha television. Well, the negotiations over the purchase of 36 Rafale fighter jets have entered the final stages. India and France have managed to narrow down their differences over the pricing. PTI is quoting government sources as saying that the deal has not been concluded yet, but it is in the final stages. The development came nearly 4 months after Prime Minister Narendra Modi and French President François Hollande signed a memorandum of agreement to purchase 36 Rafale combat jets. The Indian side has been negotiating hard to bring down the price of the Rafale deal. Sources said the price for 36 Rafales as per the UPA tender, keeping the cost escalation and dollar rate in mind, comes to a little over 65,000 crore rupees. The effort by the current government is to bring down the prices to less than 59,000 crore rupees. The expectation is that the final deal will be clinched by May end. Well, after several increases in petrol and diesel prices, their rates were slashed with effect from Friday midnight. Petrol price was cut by 0.74 rupees per litre and diesel by 1 rupee 30 paise per litre, reversing the 2-month trend of rising rates. Petrol will now cost 61.13 in Delhi, while a litre of diesel will cost 48.01. The reduction comes on the back of 2 straight increases in petrol prices, 3.07 rupees a litre on March 17th and 2.19 rupees per litre on April 4th. Diesel prices also saw 4 straight hikes before the cut. Its price was last hiked on April 4th by 0.98 rupees a litre and 3 previous increases totaling 3.65 rupees per litre. Well, the government has suspended Vijay Mallya's passport. Apart from that, the Enforcement Directorate that is probing money laundering charges against him has moved a special court in Mumbai seeking a non-bailable warrant against him. The NBW is in connection with a 900 crore rupees IDBI loan fraud case. The passport of Mallya, who is an MP and has been in Britain for over a month and has refused to appear before the ED, was suspended by the External Affairs Ministry on the recommendation of the agency. Mallya, who had refused to appear before the ED on 3 occasions when summoned between March 10th and April 2nd, had left the country on March 2nd, the day the consortium of 13 banks that had lent him money had closed in on him by moving the Debt Recovery Tribunal. The consortium also later rejected his offer of paying an initial installment of 4,000 crore rupees and settling the rest of the amount later. Failing to respond to the ED summons, Mallya had repeatedly sought fresh dates, but the agency declined any further relief.
There is a proceeding that the government has instituted based on the Enforcement Directorate's recommendation. His passport seems to have been suspended because he didn't appear before the Enforcement Directorate. And they have also given him a show cause notice, that's what I gather, asking him to show cause why his passport should not be revoked. They've given him a week's time to respond. We must see what he's going to do with it.
जहाँ तक विजय माल्या का सवाल है, उसके बारे में बिल्कुल राइट डायरेक्शन में सरकार जा रही है और किसी भी तरह से किसी भी रूप में उनको जो है वो दूसरा कटरोची नहीं बनने दिया जाएगा, जिस तरह से कांग्रेस ने किया था.
Bolting the stable after the horse has fled. First of all, you make the horse flee, and after that suspend his passport. It's a funny government that earlier, when Lalit Modi's passport was suspended, you were facilitating his travel with documents. So therefore, this is just a cover-up. It's a smokescreen.
The world's leading economies took a step toward denying tax evaders and money launderers around the world the ability to hide behind anonymous shell companies. Acting in the wake of the Panama Papers scandal, finance chiefs of the Group of 20 Powers meeting in Washington supported proposals requiring authorities to share the identities of the real owners of shell companies. They also backed creating a blacklist of international tax havens which do not cooperate with information sharing programs. The move would also be vital to prevent misuse of these entities and arrangements for corruption, tax evasion, terror financing and money laundering. The financial leaders from the Group of 20 nations also said that they were heartened by a recent recovery in financial markets, but warned that global growth was modest and uneven and threatened by weakness in commodities-based economies. With this in mind, the finance ministers and central bank governors repeated their pledge to refrain from competitive currency devaluations, but offered no new initiatives to keep growth from stalling. The G20 nations also maintained their previous pledges to consult closely on exchange rates. The G20 gathering came amid growing pressure on richer nations to boost infrastructure spending, deregulate industries and spur employment.
That's why it was our Prime Minister, David Cameron, who put these issues at the forefront of the then G8 agenda. That's why it's been European finance ministers gathered here today who, working with bodies like the OECD and the IMF, who've ensured that the fight against tax evasion and unfair tax practices are at the top of the G20's work.
欢迎一些 G20 成员近期采取政策措施来促进增长和稳定市场，并重申承诺在国备层面和 G20
External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj will embark on a 2-day visit to Iran today. The aim will be to step up engagement in a range of areas including oil and trade. The visit will be the first by any Indian minister since the lifting of sanctions against Iran. Iran is an important country for India for its energy security as well as to get access to oil and gas-rich Central Asian nations. Swaraj's visit to Tehran is seen as a balancing act following Modi's trip to Riyadh, during which both the countries had signed a number of pacts. Following lifting of sanctions against Iran, India has been eyeing deeper energy ties with that country and has already lined up $20 billion as investment in oil and gas as well as petrochemical and fertilizer projects there. In Tehran, Swaraj will hold extensive talks with her Iranian counterpart. The External Affairs Minister will also call on Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. From Iran, Swaraj will leave for a two-day trip to Moscow to attend the annual Foreign Ministers meeting of RIC, which is Russia, India and China. On the sidelines of RIC, Swaraj is expected to meet her Chinese counterpart and is likely to raise the issue of China blocking India's bid to ban Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Masood Azhar by the UN. In other international news now, a second powerful quake measuring 7.3 on the Richter scale hit southern Japan in the early hours today. This quake comes just a day after a 6.4 magnitude quake left 9 people dead. The quake hit the southern Japanese city of Kumamoto and at least 19 people are reported dead and hundreds injured. A village was evacuated after a dam collapsed following the quake. A tsunami warning was issued but later lifted. Japan's nuclear authority said that the Sendai nuclear plant was not damaged. The quake was originally assessed as a magnitude 7.1 but revised upwards to 7.3 later. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has ordered to mobilize more troops to quake-hit southern Japan.
自衛隊をはじめ対応に当たる実動部隊を大幅に増強し、住民の安全確保を最優先に、被災者の救命救助、避難誘導、医療行為の提供などの災害応急対策に政府の総力を結集し取り組むこと。
12時時点で約1300名ちょっとぐらいの方が避難をされておりまして、ただ夕方になると帰ってこられるケースがやっぱりどうしても出てくるもんですから、もうちょっと増えるかなというふうには思っております。やっぱり家ではまだちょっと不安がられるかなと、余震も続いてますし。
Well, the lower house in Brazil has begun a three-day debate on impeaching President Dilma Rousseff. The debate is on whether to recommend her trial to the Senate. The president of the Chamber of Deputies opened the debate after a congressional committee recommended impeachment on Monday. In acrimonious exchanges on the floor of the Congress, pro-impeachment lawmakers chanted Dilma out at the start of the debate, which is set to culminate with a vote on Sunday, which Rousseff is widely expected to lose. The government lost a last-ditch appeal on Thursday before the Supreme Court to halt the impeachment process. Rousseff is accused of manipulating budget accounts in 2014 to secure her re-election. She has strongly rejected the accusation, branding the impeachment process a coup after several allied parties abandoned Rousseff's coalition in recent weeks. The opposition is expected to gain the two-thirds of votes in the 513-seat lower house to send the process to the Senate. But in the middle of all this, there is some support for Rousseff. Former President Lula da Silva says that the impeachment move will fail and that the vote will only destabilize the country.
Declaro abertas inscrições individuais para discussão do parecer da Comissão Especial destinada a dar parecer sobre a denúncia contra a senhora Presidente da República por crimes de responsabilidade.
A prisão que nós vivemos, enojados no meio da mentira, da corrupção, da inverdade, da irresponsabilidade, do gosto pelo poder, sem se preocupar.
Quem trai um compromisso selado nas urnas não vai sustentar acordos feitos nas sombras. Eu estou convencido de que o golpe do impeachment não passará. Derrubar um governo eleito democraticamente, sem que haja um crime de responsabilidade, não vai consertar nada. Só vai agravar a crise.
Well, India will take on world champions Australia in the finals of the Sultan Azlan Shah Cup today. India finished in the second spot after defeating host Malaysia 6-1 on Friday to enter the finals for the seventh time. SV Sunil, Harjeet Singh, Ramandeep Singh, Danish Mushtaba and Talwinder Singh scored for India. while Shahril Sabah scored a consolation goal for Malaysia. Australia had thrashed India 5-1 in the league match as they finished the league phase with an all-win record. The world champions are vying for their record 8th Sultan Azlan Shah Cup title. In other sports news now, Bengaluru has been chosen to host the IPL final after the league officials met on Friday to discuss the alternate venues for the matches shifted out of drought-hit Maharashtra. In a meeting between IPL chairman Rajiv Shukla and representatives of the rising Pune Super Giants and Mumbai Indians, it was decided to allot IPL's final and the first qualifier to Bengaluru. The two affected franchises were asked to pick from Raipur, Jaipur, Visakhapatnam and Kanpur as their alternate home base. While Pune opted for Visakhapatnam, Mumbai Indians have sought 2 days' time to choose their new base. Mumbai, Pune and Nagpur were the three venues in Maharashtra holding IPL matches, but the Bombay High Court ordered to shift 13 matches, including the final, out of the state in the view of the severe drought in Maharashtra.
The playoff matches will be shifted out of Maharashtra. So earlier those matches were scheduled in Pune and Mumbai. So we are shifting them to Bangalore. So Q1 and final will be played in Bangalore and Q2 and eliminator will be played in Calcutta. There were 4 venues which had been suggested to them, out of which Pune has gone for Visakhapatnam and Mumbai Indian has to come back to us.
Well, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of the Breakfast News. Have a good day.